Buenas tardes, welcome. It's good to have you all here with us for this important discussion on the state of artistic freedom in Cuba. My name is Marilyn Volkman. I'll be moderating this evening's discussion. I'm the director of Entry Gallery, and I'm responsible for artistic. I'd like to welcome you all very warmly to this evening's discussion, Imprisoned for Art, Artistic Freedom Under Attack in Cuba. Tonight's panel is co-organized by the Vienna Master and Entry Gallery. The Vienna Master of Applied Human Rights is the first master program working specifically at the intersection of arts and human rights. Entre Gallery is a new space in Vienna that's focused on social and political understanding through art. On view now at Entre that opened on the 1-year anniversary of 27N. 27N, which is both a day and a community, formed in Havana when hundreds of artists, journalists, intellectuals, and citizens assembled at the Cuban Ministry of Culture to reject state violence against artists. Obsession is co-curated by Solveig Font, who's with us here tonight, and who will speak more about the exhibition later on. Included in the exhibition is Hamlet Lavastida, who's also speaking tonight, and we are very grateful to be joined by an expert panel tonight, who together will shed light on critical issues of censorship in Cuba and explore strategies for securing artistic freedom, both through lived experiences and from years of experience in the field of human rights. We expect that tonight will offer perhaps new information to some of you, while hopefully exploring synergies between everyone who's here tonight and finding ways to improve conditions for artists on the ground and the release of those artists who are currently imprisoned in Cuba. At the same time, on the occasion of tonight's discussion, we celebrate the work and the courage of Cuban artists, Cuban cultural producers, journalists, and activists who continue working relentlessly in an effort to secure free expression, even in the face of antagonism, surveillance, and violence. We thank you all to share your stories. So I'd now like to introduce our speakers very briefly, and then I'll go more into depth later before each panelist speaks. With us tonight, we have Hamlet Lavastida, Cuban artist and activist by way of his art, Solveig Font, independent Cuban curator, Manfred Novak, scientific director of the Vienna Master in Applied Human Rights and UN expert, and Andra Matai, managing director of Avant-Garde Lawyers and co-author of the Pan America Report on Decree 349. It was also planned that Alexandra Zanhaiki, the UN Special Rapporteur on Cultural Rights, would be joining us this evening. Professor Zanhaiki expresses her regrets about not being able to participate today. She had urgent matters to attend to, but she will meet the panelists personally very soon to receive their firsthand accounts of the situation, and this will inform her further research and investigation on questions to her, which we will transmit to the Special Rapporteur. Questions in general can be submitted in two places during this discussion: in the Facebook comments under the live stream, and on Zoom in the Q&A section that you see right here. So while the event will be held in English, please also feel free to chat your questions to us either in Spanish or in English. Before we begin, I would like to also welcome you, the audience from work or perhaps from Cuba. Wherever you may be, please know that we're happy to have you here, and we're also recording tonight's discussion, which will later be put online for further accessibility. As for the format for the discussion tonight, we will have 2 rounds to start, where each panelist will answer a question. And that will be followed by time for your questions and your thoughts through an audience Q&A. Before we jump into the rounds, I would like to play a short 5-minute, each of which is connected to the 27N community in Cuba. The first clip is footage of the original gathering at the Ministry of Culture in Havana on the 27th of November of last year. And the second clip is 2 months later in the same location when artists demanded follow through on a meeting with the ministry, and it demanded to know the location of missing artists. And finally, after that, you will see an excerpt of 27N's manifesto communicated.
Reconocimiento y respeto al posicionamiento independiente político, que sea el amor y la poesía lo que una a este pueblo.
En cadenas vivir es vivir, en afrenta y oprobio sumido, de Clarín escuchar el sonido, a las almas valientes correr.
Entramos si se van, se tienen que ir. Ellos se van, la policía,
así no puede ser.
con artistas
Antes que nosotros tenemos derecho a hacer nosotros no somos artistas, no somos terroristas. Estamos ofreciendo pasar a la represión con la policía con pistola. Allá hay policía con pistola. Hay policía con pistola. Allá hay personas con pistola. Personas que van a dar golpes, y usted lo sabe. Acá hay personas con pistola, y usted lo sabe. Y nosotros somos artistas. ¿Por qué eso? ¿Por qué tanto nivel de represión con el arte? Hay policías con pistola. Policías con pistola.
Aquí uno tiene...
Al pilla.
El 27 de noviembre de 2020, más de 300 intelectuales, artistas y periodistas acudimos al Ministerio de Cultura para exigir el reconocimiento de nuestras libertades y derechos ciudadanos y para expresar el rechazo a la violencia de Estado sostenida por años e incrementada en los últimos meses.
El detonante de esta manifestación fueron los hechos ocurridos en el barrio San Isidro la noche anterior, de la necesidad de continuar el camino de reclamos que se inició aquel día y de la voluntad de participar en el presente y futuro de Cuba surge el 27N.
Somos una comunidad abierta, diversa, impulsada fundamentalmente por jóvenes artistas e intelectuales, reunida por el azar y cohesionada por el deseo de construir un país más justo y digno para todos los cubanos.
Constituidos de manera horizontal, intentamos sustituir el verticalismo de liderazgos tradicionales por medio del debate y la generación de consensos que respondan a la diversidad de su membresía y no a la unanimidad de criterios.
Lo que propicia prácticas más democráticas, plurales e inclusivas. No somos un movimiento político, sino cívico. Contamos con la creación artística, el trabajo intelectual como principales herramientas.
Mediante decisiones tomadas en conjunto y bajo una dialéctica constante, nos organizamos en grupos para trabajar, integrados voluntariamente por los activistas según su disponibilidad de tiempo.
Sus talentos y habilidades, sin que ello implique jerarquía ni privilegios, dentro de esa sociedad que crece cada día y de la que puede formar parte cualquier ciudadano cubano.
Independientemente de su ideología, ocupación, lugar de residencia, siempre que lo acompañen la honestidad, el civismo y el respeto a la libertad de expresión.
No actuamos en secreto, pues nada ilegal hacemos. Visibilizamos nuestras ideas en nuestras plataformas digitales.
No aceptamos pronunciamientos discriminatorios que fomenten el odio político, ni que atenten contra nuestras libertades y derechos defendidos por nuestra comunidad.
Nuestro accionar es cívico, pacífico, solidario, dialogante, comprometido con los sufrimientos de la sociedad cubana actual y con sus aspiraciones de un futuro de democracia y bienestar.
No existen fines de lucro ni influencia de intereses extranjeros o organizaciones políticas. Solo rige la voluntad de la ciudadanía cubana.
Basamos nuestra existencia en el principio político y jurídico recogido en la Carta Internacional de los Derechos Humanos, así como en la Constitución de la República de Cuba, aprobada el 19 de abril del 2019, de que todos los ciudadanos deben tener garantías para disfrutar con toda igualdad plena de todos los derechos y libertades.
Sin distinciones de raza, color, género, identidad sexual, posición política, nivel de acceso económico, origen social, lugar de nacimiento, religión, situación de discapacidad o cualquier otra condición.
Hacemos valer de este modo nuestro derecho a expresarnos, asociarnos y manifestarnos libremente, condenando ante Cuba y el mundo todo hecho que atente contra esos derechos humanos.
To speak. As I mentioned before, Andra is one of the co-authors of the report from PEN America. It's called Art Under Pressure, Decree 349 Restricts Creative Freedom in Cuba. Andra's work is committed to promoting pro bono culture for artists facing harassment and censorship for peacefully expressing their social and political opinions through art. Andra will give an overview of the situation of artistic freedom in Cuba using her legal insights from the report. Andra, the floor.
Hello to everyone, to my fellow panelists and to everyone watching us. I'm very happy to be a part of this event and looking very much forward to learning from my co-panelists today. Now, Cuba remains in a devastating social, cultural, health, economic and political crisis. We all witnessed the government's violent response to the demonstrations that took place throughout last year. According to international monitoring groups, at least 40 artists were arrested during protests and many others were put under house arrest or on sham trials. Let's say Decree 349 does not help in these situations. The decree was passed in December 2018, but prior to its enactment, the situation of artists in Cuba was far from perfect. Artists critical of the government or of the status quo were censored, arbitrarily detained, arrested, or even disappeared. This decree represents, in a way, I would even say it codifies practices already in place. Now, I will try to highlight some of the major changes this piece of legislation brings and explain the terrible consequences they have on Cuban culture, on the society as a whole, and specifically on artistic expression. The first one erases the distinction between independent artists and officially registered artists. Prior to the passing of this decree, there were two categories registered with the Ministry of Culture. Those officially registered agreed not to create work that was critical of the government, while the independent ones were less scrutinized, but at the same time, they had no access to state resources, art spaces, and platforms controlled by the government. Decree 349 compels all those engaging in any artistic output to be officially registered. Now, this also means that the state decides who is an artist and who is not. The decree does not make a distinction between artists who identify themselves as such and those who do not. It can be applied even in situations where the performers believe in good faith that they were not engaged in artistic labor. It is the case of religious groups whose religious expressions imply singing or dancing or any type of performance. On the other hand, those artists were not considered and registered as artists. To enforce these new rules, the decree empowers a new class of inspectors. We don't know if these inspectors have an art education or knowledge of basic concepts of human rights or free speech. But what we know for sure is that they have wide discretionary powers. They can use punitive measures, impose fines, seize instruments, equipments, or accessories. They can even suspend a show or artistic representation when the circumstances call for the intervention. An inspector has 72 hours to write a report and to justify a suspension. The report can indeed be appealed, but in reality, even if the appeal is allowed, the harm has already been done. The performance did not take place. These types of retrospective judicial authorizations do not meet the requirements of a proper judicial review. And this leads me to my second point, which is the fact that the decree fails to set up. When we are dealing with censorship or prior censorship, proper judicial review is essential to making sure that any restriction on the right to free expression is lawful. Now, very quickly, the most problematic sections are those dealing with audiovisual work. Art inspectors can exclude from audiovisual channels art that might be considered controversial, pornographic, obscene, detrimental to children's development. There is a long list. None of these terms are defined. We don't know what they mean by obscene or pornographic, and we can't possibly guess what an inspector might consider vulgar or obscene, etc. Using vague language and broad terminology are textbook strategies of authoritarian regimes to gain and maintain control. This is why prior censorship should be exceptional, limited only to the most serious of crimes. Our collateral damage of these provisions is that they lead to self-censorship. Artists don't know anymore what they can or cannot say. They think twice before engaging in artistic expressions. They hesitate. They do art differently. And this has long-lasting consequences on the culture and on the Cuban society as a whole. Now, on this positive note, I'm going to end here my answer. I hope it answers the question, but if there are any questions at the end, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for giving us this really important overview. And of course, it helps give insight into why artists are living at risk in Cuba and what was solidified in terms of the legal structures with the issuance of the decree. Thank you. Next, I would like to invite Hamlet to speak. Hamlet Lavastida is a Cuban artist and an activist by way of his art. Hamlet's work reconstructs Cuban revolutionary imagery and slogans through meticulously hand-cut stencils, highlighting the distinctly Cuban spirit of cultural resistance, while at the same time demystifying the power of imagery and slogans to be used as tools of propaganda. Hamlet will share with us his work and his own story as a Cuban artist, his recent imprisonment and exile, as well as insights into the urgent situation of artists who are still imprisoned in Cuba. And images of Hamlet's work will also show while he's speaking, so I hand it off to you, Hamlet. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, everyone. Do you listen? To me? Because I don't. Let me check.
We can hear you perfectly.
Well, yes. My name is Hamlet Lavastida. I think already Marilyn make a small introduction of me. So, yes. Well, basically, I'm now in Berlin after spend 3 months in jail in Cuba and maximum security prison, Yamarista prison, who is in charge to crimes against, and then after that, it was like a meticulous process, if we can call it meticulous, from the Cuban government side, when they basically put in a plane, me and Catherine Bisquet, they were sent directly to Poland. So this is deal sorry to make. I think it could take like a few hours to speak in English for this audience. Already I mentioned it in several places in Spanish, but well, yes, one of the things that among many things that they were accused inside the Villa Marista headquarters is about the role of my work, the role of several artists, role in the activist, new emerging activist group that are in Cuba, specifically those ones that are related with the cultural rights, civic rights, and political rights, as a 27N platform, movement, whatever they can call it, but also with the Movimiento de San Isidro, and eventually also with the INSTAR, the Institute of Honor and founded by Tania Bruguera. So basically, they were looking for that what always this kind of intelligence organisms are looking if there are connections with the United States, with the State Department, with another foreign agency or foreign country connection with the work that we're doing. So we have to understand here for the foreign audience that they don't see separately at art. They see it as a kind of propaganda tool to basically to undermine the Cuban regime. Not going to the specific of life of any of these artists and activists. They just see it as a whole plot, as a sort of a QAnon society that is there trying to grab the state and basically put in the firing square the communists in Cuba. So this radical vision about who we are and what we do and what in the plan we have projected to do is what the Cuban government is speculating. So the interesting thing is that being myself in that interrogations is that I already know a little bit of what they're going to ask me, because in my process of research and archive work, I try to understand what is the psychological pressure that they put behind this kind of artists and activists and dissidents. So in this same category, is very interesting how the Cuban government already have a projected strategy. We already know the case of a very famous Cuban poet and critic and writer, Alberto Padilla, that in 1971 he was put in the same prison, Villa Marista, when I was, and several other artists were put in there also. But I like to understand, because it was a phenomenon that really make a tectonic shift in the Cuban culture and in Cuban intellectual culture, not only inside Cuba, but only abroad, questioning exactly what is the role of the socialism, what is the role of political militants towards art and towards culture. So what I try to say here is that there is the long history of cultural repression in Cuba. Also, this is the main focus of my work, and that basically started in 1960 or 1961 when there was they forbid the Cuban Institute of Cinema, ICAI, forbid and censor, ban from the public exhibition a documentary that was called PM, like PM referring to PM at night. So from Orlando Jimenez Leal and Saba Cabrera, they were the authors. So basically start the problems with how the government manage culture, how the government manage art and intellectuals, what they have to say, what they should say regarding the society, or regarding the society aspiration or the political aspiration. More recently, we've seen incredible confrontation between the new group of activists, especially from the Movimiento San Isidro. But if we can go a little bit more before, we have to understand that the Movimiento San Isidro, the people that were the nucleus of Movimiento San Isidro, already make an interesting project. That was the biennial, the 00 biennial or Bienal 00. It was in response to the decirculation of the Cuban government of the Havana Biennial that were supposedly to celebrate it in that year in early 2018. So Luis Manuel Otero, Yanelis Núñez, and Catherine Bisquet also, they were part of the curatorial group in at the time, and they invited several artists with the most curious thing, with the same kind of aesthetic or same kind of statement that it was the first Havana Biennial in 1984, that by the way was a state sponsored, no? But why I'm talking about that? Because I think, and all the artistic community and intellectual community in Cuba think that the Cuban government issued the decree 349 because they see an increase in activity, independent artists and the period curatorial project that were not reframing from the state and governmental apparatus. So this is, I think we can continue here talking about what it was related to 349, Decreto 349, and also other decrees that they were issued regarding the specific, like the press, like the freedom of speech. It's like the decree 370, Decreto 339, and the most recently an article 35 that is regarding and is targeting specifically also the information that you manage by the media. But also now regarding laws, they're going to make a change in the penal code in Cuba. There is basically a project for commenting that the situation would be more strict. So basically, regarding artistic freedom, cultural freedom, and our political freedom in Cuba, we are in a 0 point. Although that many artists and intellectuals and critics are and activists and dissidents, they were very vocal against the Cuban government policies, but basically now in a very confrontational time that started between this 2018, it was increasing in 2019 with the constitution, the new constitution that was elaborated by the Communist Party. Then in 2020, we have the event of San Isidro and the 27N solidarity movement, and the things are shaping. We have motivation, we have certain motivation. We could be optimistic in one side, but pessimistic in the other one. But the government also could be optimistic and negative in their own side. So this is in both of the hands. So I don't know. I just wanted to make a small presentation, and I want to everyone that can support it and said a little bit more about that. It would be great. I think this is one of the idea, and that why we are here. And just Marilyn have to let me know how are the things, no?
Yeah, thank you so much, Hamlet. Also explaining the really important historical aspect, I think, helps kind of inform a bit in the amount of time that we have what came before, what's happening in Cuba now. I also wonder if you might want to just maybe mention now the situation of Luis Manuel Otero. And
yes,
yeah,
yes, this is a yes. Also, yes, I forgot because there are many things occurring at the same time, and sometimes things escape from your mind. Yes, now also we have the very specific situation of Luis Manuel Otero and Michael Castillo, but not only them. There's a lot of hundreds. The number is there. It have a variation because there is difficult to independently verify this inside Cuba. But several artists. There is also one musician, Abel. I forget Abel Escay. I think that he's from the musician that he's also facing prison and the prosecution in Cuba. And Luis Manuel Otero, that is a relevant activist in Cuba. Everybody know him, especially in the art circle now. He decided to do a hunger strike in Guanajay prison that is a few kilometers from Havana to the west. And Guanajay, he's there and he's just looking, he's looking for being released, and also he's looking for for not escalate this radicalization in the Cuban government towards artists and towards activists. So I think the demand of Luis Manuel Otero are absolutely legitimate. Everybody in Cuba understand that there are everybody that is concerned about this issue. No, we have to say that very clear. But at the same time, he's just making remark on the basic human rights principles that are established in the Human Rights Charter. But at the same time, curiously, in the several articles of the Cuban Constitution, the new Constitution of 2019, that basically are the principle of the Movimiento de San Isidro and also the principle of the 27 of November group, the principle of many activists and political activists in Cuba. And he's demanding his release, but also he's claiming for the release of all political prisoners, including childs, including women, a lot that are facing persecution this same week. So we have a very drastic and deteriorated condition, not only with artists, but all as a society as a whole. Manuel Otero went to this kind of a public Pacific manifestation, the 11th of July. He was detained and he was thrown in jail with a crazy acts that the record that they wanted to put him on him, and he just basically and absolutely disagree. And he just basically in jail. What you only can do is just mobilize your body, mobilize your mind in this situation of hunger strike. People could be disagreeing in certain ways or not, but we have to basically accept that his condition, what he's saying is not, he don't want to be deported, he don't want to be sent abroad, as was do it with me, with Catherine Bisquet, and also with now with the journalist Esteban Rodriguez, Luis Court, and Esteban Luis and Hector Luis. They were also sent to El Salvador, Nicaragua at the end, but Nicaragua's authority, they refused it. So Luis Manuel Otero and Michael Castillo, who are now facing, they are the focus of this main activism situation with art. They are just demanding their release, unconditional release. Probably the government, what they want is to deport and send it abroad, and this is the condition that they are now. And we are basically every day looking forward how the situation is unfolded, you know, disinvolved in the reality.
Okay, thank you, Hamlet. Really important information. All right. Now I would like to invite Solveig Font to speak. Like I mentioned, Solveig Font is a independent Cuban curator. She's a former specialist within UNIAC, the National Union of Writers of Cuba. She is a former curator at Fábrica de Arte Cubano, and in 2014, Solveig founded A Veces Art Space, an independent gallery in the space of her Havana home, where she invited artists and curators to exhibit in her apartment as an alternative to state-controlled spaces for art. So Sol will share with us her experiences as a curator and the backstory on the exhibition that she curated here in Vienna at Entre, and also a bit about what partnering with Entre and the Vienna Master has meant to her current work. So Solveig, I turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you all for listening and thinking about Cuba, of which I am part. I worked for 11 years at UNIAC, Union of Cuban and Writers of Cuba, first in the visual arts section and later in the Villa Manuela Gallery of the same institution. This cultural institution that in this foundational status leave out any artist, creator, or intellectual who dissent from the state cultural policy. One example is part of her status is Article 2, to say, Union of Cuban and Writers of Cuba acts in accordance with the precepts of the Constitution of the Republic of Cuba and recognize the Communist Party of Cuba as the superior leading force of society and the state. Finally, I left UNIAC in 2013, and in 2013 I joined to the transdisciplinary project that was Fábrica de Arte Cubano, FAC, as a curator, and while there, I created the alternative and independent space in my house. The name is A Veces Art Space. A space born from the need to exhibit work and idea far from the conservative standard of gallery and institutional exhibition spaces. The Cuban gallery system was and is insufficient, classes, and inoperative. Art gallery, private or independent galleries today, commercial or non-commercial, are forbidden in Cuba. We have found a legal background that consists in the fact that if we carry out this project in our homes, the family law gives us a certain of apparent security. Although we have suffered for more than 20 years, the harassment for the Cuban state security and, security against the owner of these houses and these spaces. Decree 349 appeared to legalize terror, control, and censorship years later. I want to talk too about my, like a curator, my profession is not among the inside of the 124 activities authorized by the state to exercise on their own. According to the National Classifier of Economy Activities in Cuba, curators do not exist. We do not work. We do not have social security. We cannot associate it. No, we can be organized or defend our rights. The exhibition finally bring me to Vienna, Austria, and to this context and space, I call it Obsession. We call it Obsession, and it's a collective exhibition of Cuban artists. And that one to make it visible. The idea of the exhibition, the objective of the exhibition wants to make visible today Cuban context through the eyes and work of the artists who are part of this constant struggle for rights, for freedom, for dissent, and freedom for expression in Cuba. For 4 years ago, we began to fight against the Decree 349. We're talking about this decree, which was followed by support from the San Isidro movement. And in November 27th, 2020, the 27N community was born in protest in front of the Ministry of Culture. The trigger was the police violence exerted the previous day against the San Isidro movement, and also the increase of the censorship and repression against artists, intellectuals, and activists. Since then, members of 27N have suffered constant attacks from the government, from all the cultural institutions, from the media, and from state security. The government concentrates on promoting in the defamation campaign, hatred, perjury, illegality, no law, and fear. During all these months, they have, when during this month, they have put surveillance in our houses, cannot leave our houses for more than 160 days in some cases. They have treatment us, summoned several times to police station. They have forbidden us from meeting. They have held repudiation ads. They have cut off our connection to internet and any telephone channel to us and our families. We have been beaten by the Minister of Deputy Minister of Culture and by the state security. And the lawyers do not want to take our cases because they do not want to be pressured or persecuted for the state security. Our families live in the eternal terror. Our children are vulnerable. Our private and public life is questioned and disobeyed and disowned, by those who were your friends and neighborhoods. In the end, you to end up begin a treat. During all this time, our obsession was and is to genocide it, to make visible these facts that are the facts of today and yesterday in Cuba. The work and the exhibition is the way we find to channel this pain. It is the need to show anxiety, depression, stress, and fear with what we know how to do the best, art. The entry gallery, this gallery, give me this opportunity and this artist the opportunity and the friendship with the curator, artist, and professor Marilyn. We meet around 2015 and we immediately start doing project together. She is the scholar of Cuban art and the Cuban context, and what better place than here, this gallery to be able to realize this dream, which is also accompanied by the magnificent workshop and the Master of Vienna on art and human rights. I told the students in the workshop that they are my fate in tomorrow, in the men and in the institution that have to ensure that the things that happen in Cuba today do not happen. The Cubans have been living on hope for 30 years, and they are to hope the hope of Cubans. This master's degree have us the opportunity, give us the opportunity to tell others with cultures very different from mine, a constant struggle. I could see in the need to know more, to help us change, to project a future in which everything is different. They give us tools to continue our fight and above all this, give as humanity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sol, for really sharing your experiences and reality as a curator, and thank you for working with us. We're really happy to
Thank you.
spend time with you and our students as well. And I also want to ask the artwork behind you, which is part of Obsession. Maybe tell us a little bit about that as well. I think it's interesting.
This is the art of Liz Manuel Otero Alcantara. It's the first time we have these pieces in exhibition. This is the piece of the middle. This is the video made for Liz Manuel in 2016. I don't remember well. No, 220. And see, the security put a camera, surveillance camera, in front of her house, and he created this piece. And in this piece, he is in love with the camera. And in the day of the lovers, February 14, he created this video. It's a song to the camera. And the drawings are on the piece. It's like a frame, love frame. It's the drawings he made it when he beginning in the hospital. When he made an exhibition in her house. And the security entering her house and stolen her work, and taken him, and he go to the police, and they never given again the work they stolen. And for that, he began this hunger stroke, and this I think I remember like 7 days on hunger stroke, and the security take him, her body, and go to the hospital, and he stay in the hospital for 30 days. And in those 30 days, he made these drawings. It's like a reference about the camera. What happened if the camera is my lover? I make this relation with the camera. But what we think, because we never had the opportunity to talk with Liz Manuel because he is in the jail until 11 July. When I come here to the exhibition and all this happened, he's already in jail, between jail and the house. For that, we suppose, but he think all the people in this hospital, all the people when he stays 3 days in the hospital, nobody can enter, no friends, no family, everything, all the person there is security. For that, beginning to think like all the people around there is a camera. And what happened if you have a relation with the camera? They have sex with the camera and the drawings. And what happened if they have sons, they have daughters? He's in love with this camera now. This is the relation between love and hate, and dream and nightmare, and we want to mix these two things in this piece, like a frame of love, a frame of hate. That is talking about a lot about the Liz Manuel Otero Alcantara work. And this is for he. This is for he. Today is the 15 days in the hunger stroke in the jail today.
Thank you, Sol. And we will share also the website and information on the exhibition later, so those of you in Havana or online can see the work. Thanks a lot, Sol.
Thank you.
For the next question or discussion, I'd like to invite Manfred Novak. Manfred Novak is the scientific director of the Vienna Master Program, as I mentioned. He's also the UN expert for the global study on children deprived of liberty and the former UN Special Rapporteur on torture from 2004 to 2010, where he undertook 18 field missions on continents all over the world. Manfred will speak perhaps about the power or the synergies that lie between arts and human rights, and why partnerships like the one between Entre and Cuban artists is really important for the University of Applied Arts and especially for the Vienna Master. Manfred, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. I should say that we started about 1 year ago the Vienna Master of Arts in Applied Human Rights. So it means that we are teaching students from all over the world, not only the theory of human rights from an interdisciplinary perspective, but also the practice. We want that they, after those 2 years, actually go out to the field and become change makers, become human rights defenders. But it is the first master of human rights in the University of Applied Arts. And that means that we are combining the arts on the one hand with human rights, and human rights and arts have much in common. On the one hand, human rights is a universally accepted value system, but it is under threat currently, and we have to reach out to a much broader audience, and nobody else is better prepared to do that than artists, whether it is via cinema, music, the applied arts, visual arts, theater, street theater, poetry, you name it. But on the other hand, in a time when democracy and human rights are under threat, many socially engaged artists are actually looking for applying their artist skills for a good cause, and that is for human rights. So we are attracting, on the one hand, human rights people who want to do more, to learn more about the arts and to use arts in their human rights work. But we are also attracting artists who say, we would like to know a little bit more about human rights in order to use our artistic skills. And by that, artists are becoming human rights defenders. And in the current world climate, human rights defenders are very often under threat. In Cuba, but also in many other countries. So artists themselves are actually in need of protection of their human rights. Of course, on the one hand, it's their freedom of speech, their freedom of assembly, but also international human rights provide specific protection for freedom of the arts against any form of censorship, but any other forms of repression. And it means in particular, if artists simply because they're standing up for their ideas are imprisoned, very often are tortured, sometimes they disappear, etc. So human rights and the international human rights framework are there also to protect artists as human rights defenders. The United Nations even developed an international declaration on human rights defenders. It's very, very strange because human rights is a beautiful concept, and all states in the world have promised that they are respecting, protecting, and fulfilling human rights. But nevertheless, we hear many journalists, many professors, many NGO activists, but also many artists are actually under threat in so many countries of the world. Andra Matea can tell you much more about what it means from a legal perspective to try to defend them, how difficult it is in so many countries. But that's why it is so important, and to come back to your question, that we at the Vienna University of Applied Arts, in particular of our Master of Applied Human Rights, we are working together with artists who are under threat, artists like the ones we have just listened to, who had to leave their country because they were imprisoned there, because they could not anymore express their arts in the way they wanted because of state repression, because of censorship, etc. And that's why it is so important also for our students to engage with Cuban artists who are now here. And I'm very grateful to Marilyn for having enabled us to develop this relationship between ENTRE, on the one hand, Cuban artists, and the Vienna Master of Arts and Applied Human Rights, so that our students can work together with Cuban artists and see what we can do together in order to defend the human rights of artists.
Thank you very much, Manfred, for really drawing all of these important connections and intersections between arts and human rights, and exactly. Ending on the note of doing things. So thanks a lot. With these comments from Manfred and from all of our speakers, we now conclude round 1 of the evening, and we'll head into round 2. And round 2 centers on the guiding question of what now? What can be done? What's needed? Andra, I turn to you again for the first question. Could you explain to us, do Cuban artists have any legal standing inside of Cuba to change their situation, to do something? Locally, perhaps, but also internationally?
I think this is an excellent question. What do we do when the state is against us? When national laws are not on our side? What recourse do artists in Cuba protect our rights? We turn to international protection by ratifying international treaties, states, and show that domestic laws are consistent with international human rights standards. Now, Cuba doesn't have a great record in signing or ratifying international conventions. It has not accepted, for instance, the jurisdiction of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights and has not ratified any of the core regional human rights treaties. But as a member of the Organization for the American States, it is held to the American Declaration of the Rights and Duties of Man, which means that its human rights policies and practices are monitored by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. The Commission may decide on individual complaints against Cuba and may also hold hearings or issue reports, but none of it is legally binding. And this is where the main difference between the court and the Commission lies. There is one exception though, and that is for the interim measures adopted by the Commission. In serious and urgent situations, the Commission can adopt interim or precautionary measures to prevent irreparable harm. Now, of course, the specific circumstances of each case are very important in the assessment of the seriousness of the situation, but in principle, this is a very powerful tool and one that is working very well. Around 17% of requests for interim measures are granted. And this is a very good percentage given that the Commission receives hundreds of requests a year. Regarding the use of UN quasi-judicial mechanisms, Cuba has not accepted the complaints procedure of any treaty bodies. This means complaints cannot be brought before the Human Rights Committee or the Committee Against Torture or any other complaint procedure of the treaty bodies. The situation is not better regarding UN special procedures. Cuba has not extended a standing invitation to UN special procedures, which means that any special rapporteur or working group must seek specific invitations from Cuba if they want to conduct country visits. For example, in 2015, the UN Special Rapporteur on Cultural Rights requested a visit, but the request was left unanswered. The only UN complaint mechanism that can be used is the Human Rights Council's complaint procedure. And this is because a complaint can be submitted before the Council against any country, irrespective of whether the country has ratified any particular treaty or made reservations, as long as they are UN member states. The procedure is confidential in principle and might take up to 3 years before a resolution or a decision is issued. The resolutions are not legally binding, but they do contain strong political commitments. Now, this is it for international and regional complaint procedures. Now, for advocacy efforts to align national laws with international human rights standards, like all UN member states, Cuba has signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, committing to guaranteeing freedom of expression, the right to peaceful assembly, the right to free choice of employment and to equal pay, and the right to an adequate standard of living, all these being highly relevant for the rights of artists. Other conventions that were signed or ratified by Cuba and that are relevant in this direction include the 2005 UNESCO Convention on the Promotion and the Protection of Cultural Expressions, the ILO's Convention concerning discrimination in employment, and the UN International Covenants, which Cuba has signed but not ratified. Now, this means that Cuba is obliged to refrain from acts which would defeat the purpose of these two treaties, both of them containing provisions that protect freedom of expression and the right to participate in cultural life. Well, I would like to finish by highlighting the fact that freedom of expression is protected by the Cuban Constitution. Article 54 provides that the state recognizes, respects, and guarantees people's freedom of thought, conscience, and expression. And this is very important. And this is important because freedom of expression is a well-established right in international law with a huge body of case law and jurisprudence. Among all the rights I mentioned earlier, it is the strongest. So I believe that any efforts and initiatives to align national law and practices in Cuba with its international commitments and obligations should heavily rely on the right to free expression.
Thank you, Andrea, for detailing the specifics. It's really important to know what's possible, what isn't, and really good thoughts moving forward. Now I would like to turn to Hamlet. Hamlet, from your experience, what do artists on the ground in Cuba need right now? If you have ideas also on how that could be provided or what's possible, let us know, but really to explain from your experience what's needed.
Okay, yes. So what we need to if it's the question, I think we need to understand the law. We need to understand the law, even if we understand that it's not so compelling to understand it, because in fact this is like a law that came from the Communist Party. I think I'm not going to tell the whole story, but we need to know the constitutional issues. We need to know exactly what they are afraid or what they want to tackle. So we need to be basically a little bit more wise. This is something that it is demonstrating in the last years, that the opposition movement in Cuba understand a little bit more the intricacies of the Cuban government legal system and judiciary system. We need to know to understand that, because doing that you can read exactly what are their basically the targets. But even more above all, what we can do doing that is comparing with the human right charter, and in that sense you can be more specific in their demands. And this is the other thing that we have to do. We need to understand that the basic principle of requirement, so asking, demanding the Cuban government to respect those fundamental rights, because this is not even something that is in question. They also said that they respect those rights. I mean, the cultural rights, the artistic freedoms, the freedom of speech, the freedom of assembly, the freedom of protest. But now the Cuban government started since 2019, the go to the law, go to the constitutional area. We have to understand that. I think in the manifesto of Movimiento de San Isidro, this is very explicit, the knowledge of the laws, because the laws are the mechanism to dismantle those rights and those freedoms. We don't have any more, and I say it repeatedly, we don't have any more Fidel Castro, who is basically, the law is what he said suddenly in a speech, was very kind of improvisation of what it was the law. Now we don't have those figures and we have the law. Now they're going to do a reactualization of the penal code. We have to understand what is happening. And this is something that is very interesting, because if we have a knowledge about that and we are required to the Cuban government how to establish their limits in that law and what they can do, we can go directly to there. But of course, we have to understand that also we need also the legitimate protest, the peaceful protest, and demand, basically demanding to them in many various ways, with art, with the civic disobedience, or with I don't know, the many tools that we have in the huge range of specific manifestation. I think this is already what happened in the 11th of July. This is an event that which really changed the whole diagram of probably of the same Cuban government, and also the foreign policy that it established in certain nations towards Cuba, and the public opinion, of course. 11th of July, it was a huge manifestation. It was a popular manifestation, but not only related with artists. It is basically people understand that their civil rights, their freedoms are the same that there were people that they were claiming in the artistic community, fundamental rights. So I think in that scenario, we have to understand a bit more, and not getting tired, because the Cuban government at the same time is moving that. It's like a kind of domino chess game, you know, that they were trying to, and also they are trying to create those laws to look like in a good position towards the international community, talking about this the rule of law and certain thing, democracy, and these words are very tricky, and they are very tricky everywhere, but in Cuba even more tricky when they put it in a law. And understand that basically is to read and to write them, you know. There are many ways to read the judiciary system in Cuba and to write them. And also we write already. Artists and activists are writing their own way to demand that the Cuban authorities. I think that example on the Ministry of Culture was incredible. This was something without no background in Cuban history, recent history of the Cuban socialist administration. I don't like to say revolution, but I said socialist administration. And then also what happened then the 27th of January, that it was another event when certain activists that they were previously in the 27th of November, artists that are even in the show that Solvin and Marilyn is creating, like Camila Lobon and so on. I don't remember even more names, but this is a way. This is, for me, is a way, demanding and asking and looking for the rights in the specific scenario, on the artistic and intellectual, in the all way possible. But I think this is the two elements. Of course, that it could be more complicated. We take several conference here, but I think that this is the things that we have to do, and also understand that this is not only that have to do inside Cuba. We can do it outside. We have already transnational society that, as it used to be, the long time ago, the Cuban Republic, and I think this is if I can answer your question with those points.
Thank you. And thank you also for giving some insights into what's been done and being done now in Cuba, and kind of alluding also to what's being done outside of Cuba by Cuban artists and activists. And now from Hamlet, I would like to invite Sol. I'd like to continue with the question of what can be done and what's being done. So in Cuba, what can civil society organizations do? What are they doing well? And what's missing? What's needed?
Thank you again. It's complicated. Cuba, the word you always use to talk about Cuban context and history is complicated. And I want to talk about one point, because in according to ECRET, the collaborative encyclopedia on the Cuban network and other state forums, civil society in Cuba is made up for more than 2,200 organizations, including social and mass organizations and scientific or technical, cultural and cultural organizations or associations, artistic, sport, friendship, and solidarity. and any others that operate under the law of associations, Law 56. None of these civil society organizations in Cuba say anything about what happened in Cuba now. These 9 Cuban mass and political organizations like FMC, CER, JC, all these political organizations are controlled directly for the Communist Party in Cuba. They do not have autonomy or decision-making power on any issue, not even on issues related to the objective for which it was created. For example, the Federation of Cuban Women, to which all Cuban women belong, since they reached the age of 14, has its central office in front of the Cuban Minister of Culture. On November 27, 2020, hundreds of women were participating in a demonstration in front of the Minister of Culture that you see before the beginning. Nobody wanted to leave in that moment there. We were afraid that they will not let us come back. So on several occasions, when we went to the doors to the Federation of Cuban Women to drink water or go to the bathroom if they needed, in all these cases, they deny us any help. On January 27, 2021, as you see in the video too, the workers of the Federation of Women, the Cuban women, were part of the bidding and the act of repudiation that was given to a group of artists who were protesting the disappearance of 3 partners. The Minister of Culture and the Deputy Minister of Culture pushed us, like you see in the video, again, sorry, toward to the gate and toward to state security agents who violently put us in a bus. Already in the bus, where they still attack us and beat us, the FMC workers yell at us, "Go away, we don't want you, down with the worms." The Federation of Cuban Women has not accompanied any woman's mother, wife, or sister of the detained and prisoners of July 11. Cuban civil society, the real one, is taking shape now as we speak. Given this scenario, it has been much more difficult to civil society organizations out of Cuba to work in and with Cuba. Since November 27, several international institutions, international civil societies, organizations, begin to contact us to give testimony of what we happening to us. Thank you to CADAL, Human Rights Watch, Females, PEN, Cuba Lex, and Independent Press. Today we have all these reports that are vital to make visible the human rights violations that have become the daily life in Cuba. In the workshop that happened now, that we are carrying out in Master of Vienna, we attend 2 conferences. At the end of this conference, I was moved by all this work they have done in investigation, information gathering, accompanying violent people. And I was surprised by their level of updating and their presentation on the situation in Cuba. However, and we are here now for that, in none of these presentations we are glimpses of solution actions. I also hear the concern of one of the students who is a lawyer regarding to legal panorama of Cuba. In that point, I confess that I did not understand much, and I asked him, like Andra Matei say, Cuba is not ratified one of the main human rights treaties that offer specific guarantee of civil and political rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and therefore has not ratified the optional protocol on the ECCPR. In 2019, the Office of the Special Rapporteur from Freedom and Expression in the Inter-American Commission, and I quote, "serious non-observance of the essential elements of freedom of expression, representative democracy, and institution persist in Cuba. Likewise, in 2020 report in the human rights situation in Cuba. How can I be that the country that's a symbol in Latin America and many other countries in the world of freedom, solidarity, support for the masses, and the maker of revolution of equality and fraternity does not sign human rights treaties? However, the Cuban state was awarded on October 14, 2020 with the accompanying position in the Human Rights Council, and I wonder why. On I remember on October 10, 2020, was being prepared at the headquarters of the San Isidro movement. The headquarters of the Movimiento San Isidro is the house of Luis Manuel Otero Alcántara, who is in prison now, I said before. When several friends arrived there, a huge act of repudiation awaited them and all the people who ended up in the jail, and all his rights violated. Days after October 14, Denis Solis, rapper and member of San Isidro movement, is in justified imprisoned, tried in summary trial and sentenced to 8 months in prison. We have a lot of work to do. That's like Hamlet said. Cuba is a dictatorship. I'm still afraid to say it out aloud. There are irreparable damage caused by the Cuban Revolution. Recently, an artist, intellectual, and a member of 27 free thinker friend was excited because finally being out of Cuba, he had given an interview to Radio Martí and had responded calmly with all the energy and eloquence that he wants. That don't happen before. That don't happen in Cuba. It takes a lot longer to change people's minds and get rid of fears and pain, and it takes a lot longer to recognize how wrong we are. That is why I believe that we should focus more than educational work and change the narrative and the history told by the state. In 2015, I made an exhibition in my space called Bonus Level about the power of those who control education. The statement says, the forms of educational and learning are not completely transparent or unidirectional, who teach, establish the ways in which this is done. At the same time, who learn has the possibility of dissent and pervert from what has been learned. To make perceptible the manipulation, failures, contradictions, success, concerns, doubts, aspiration, desires, haters, dreams, empty lies of these forms of exercise power will be as utopia, as pretending that this exhibition exhausted the subject like this in the once. This is one statement about this exhibition about power and what this, I think I want to say something more is Patria y Vida.
Thank you, Sol. And Manfred, now I'll turn to you in continuation of this question of what can be done. And again, in continuation of the conversation, perhaps about the UN. So drawing from your specific experiences as UN Special Rapporteur on torture and independent UN expert, what can the United Nations do? So where do you personally see the chances for action or chances for putting the urgent situation of Cuba on the map and making impact?
I think real changes can only be done from within the country. That means civil society, but the international community can do quite a lot to support civil society in their demands for change. And we have seen that in so many countries in Latin America during the times of the dictatorships around the continent. We have seen it in South Africa, in many other countries. And as Andra has said, there are not many possibilities under United Nations treaties because they are either not ratified or at least they have not accepted the individual complaints procedure under those treaties that are ratified. So what is left is the Human Rights Council. And I should say that from the very beginning, Cuba played a very important role. They were always very outspoken in order to defend human rights in other countries, to criticize other countries for their human rights violations. They were represented in so many different UN bodies. So Cuba really also, as was said we are in favor of human rights. Our revolution was also a human rights revolution against the Batista regime, etc. So what is possible? The one is under the Human Rights Council, which is the most important body of the United Nations. It's consisting of states, but there are non-governmental organizations, very, very outspoken. They have a right to speak and criticize governments, and of course, independent experts. And there's something called Universal Periodic Review, which is every 4 to 5 years, every state in the world, including Cuba, is subjected to a peer review by other states, but on the basis of a report by Cuba, but also many other reports of non-governmental organizations or United Nations experts. And that is provided by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And then many states can give specific recommendations. And if civil society is strong about bringing the fate of Cuban artists, and in particular, those that are exiled and those that are in prison, to the attention of the international community, that can have an impact, because every state wants to have a good human rights reputation, doesn't want to be criticized by too many other states. That's one thing. And the second is, and Andra already mentioned that, the so-called special procedures, which are independent experts of the Human Rights Council, as the independent or the special rapporteur on cultural rights, who unfortunately can't be with us today, or the special rapporteur on torture, which is a mandate that I had between 2004 and 2010. And I should say, in fact, I have been invited formally by the government of Cuba as special rapporteur on torture to visit the country, because you always need an invitation. Of course, it's not so easy. I worked on that very much with the ambassadors in Geneva, in Vienna, in New York, but also a very good friend of mine, Jean Ziegler, the Swiss, at that time, special rapporteur on the right to food. And he was actually invited by the Cuban government, and he could visit the country. And he also made a public report about the situation of food, which is, of course, much less controversial than the situation of torture, which also means that you have to visit all kinds, and you have a right, if you are invited, to visit on an unexpected way. So you're not announcing your visits. Every police station, every prison, every other detention center in the country. So they told the Human Rights Council, we invite Mr. Novak, the special rapporteur on torture, but then we had to find a date. And I proposed many different dates, and they always said, no, it's not a good time. And then I finally said, could you please provide a date when this would be convenient for your government? And they finally proposed July 2010. So it took quite some time, and I said, fine, I'm coming in July 2010. And then at the end they said, oh, July is not such a good time, because that's when most people whom you would like to see, ministers, etc., are on vacation, etc. The point that I would like to make is they invited me, they officially notified the Human Rights Council that their good intention of inviting the special rapporteur on torture, and finally it didn't work out. Now, I, of course, tried to find out what's the real reason behind that. There was a certain window of opportunity when Raúl Castro was in power, and it was his regime and his people who invited me. But then Fidel again became a little bit more active, and he said, and that's information I have from very well-informed sources within Cuba, that he said, as long as I have to say something in this country, no independent expert will visit my prisons in Cuba. And that was the final decision that I couldn't come. But perhaps now there is the Special Rapporteur on Cultural Rights has requested, and I think they should go on. But also my successor, the successor of my successor was Juan Mendes, and now it's Nils Melzer. He's also, like Jean Ziegler, a Swiss expert, as Special Rapporteur on torture. And he actually criticized, now, for instance, he was very strongly advocating the case of Julian Assange and strongly criticizing the United States, the United Kingdom, Sweden, and other Western countries to have a complot against these whistleblowers. So he has an image now of criticizing very much Western countries. And if he would ask for an invitation, I would not exclude that it would be possible. And it's very important that the Special Rapporteur is coming not only for investigating torture, which happens in Cuba, but also for investigating the conditions of detention and then meeting also Cuban artists who are currently in detention in prisons in Cuba. So that would be very, very important. And I could also assist in connecting you with Nils Melzer. I could imagine that he's interested to have a look at the real situation, the current situation in Cuba. But there's also the Special Rapporteur on freedom of expression, the Special Rapporteur on freedom of assembly. So there are many different, there's the working group on arbitrary detention. And in order for them to carry out their mandate, you don't need to ratify any kind of a treaty. It's a charter-based mechanism, and as Andra said, Cuba is a member state of the United Nations. It adheres to the Universal Declaration, so that might be a possibility. We need to keep the pressure. If Human Rights Watch and other NGOs are keeping this on the agenda, the media, then also the voice of the United Nations, which is a little bit stronger than if it is a non-governmental organization, could make a difference. So it's a combination of civil society and states on the one hand, plus independent experts, then that can make a difference.
Thanks so much, Manfred, for sharing also a bit about the intricacies of how it works as a Special Rapporteur to carry out the mandate. So now, from Manfred, I would like to hand it over to the audience. We'd like to have your questions based on what you've heard tonight, your questions to the panelists, but also I invite you to share your ideas, perhaps your wishes based on what you've heard. Let's not just hold conferences for the sake of holding them, but let's really kind of think together about what can be done. So if you, along with your questions, if you feel inspired in some way that you want to do something, you want to write an article or activate your network or involve your organization, we'd also love to hear about that as well. So for submitting the questions, remember you can do that in two places. You could do it in Facebook on the comments under the live stream, or you can do it on Zoom in the Q&A section that's below, and you can chat in Spanish or in English. And if we don't manage to touch on every question that's sent to us, we can send them along to our panelists. And in order to do that, you would need to share your email address to the host in a private message. So just to let you know, there is an option. If we don't answer the question this evening, be sure to give us your contact details to the host in a private message. Okay, so we've turned now to the first question, and this is from Jorge. And I'd like to direct the question to both Manfred and also to Andra, whoever would like to jump in. The question is, if the UN cannot do much in Cuba and Cuban artists cannot do anything in their own country, then other countries have to show solidarity. What can other states do?
Yeah, if
yes, ma'am.
I start, as I said already, there is this Universal Periodic Review, which is a peer review, and of course it is highly politicized. That's true. So if the United States is now criticizing Cuba, that will not have the strongest effect on Cuba. But if these are states that are politically somehow connected to Cuba, or kind of like-minded countries, and if they are criticizing Cuba and saying what is now going on, this new repression, this new decree of 2018, this is really undermining artistic freedom. And the Cuban government after the revolution they were very much in favor of revolutionary artists. So telling them you are violating your own values. So these kind of states could have an impact on the actual governmental response to this situation. But I hand over to Andra.
Yes, unfortunately I don't have too much to add. Just have an example of Egypt. I know at some point the Finnish government initiated like this huge activity, this initiative that gathered other governments, and they presented a proposal before the Human Rights Council, presenting the situation in Egypt. It was a bit unheard of and a bit exceptional. And I mean, I don't know of any other example that was similar to these ones, but I think when states come together, and I mean, the governments of the state, not only the civil society, they can put pressure, as you said. They need to be creative about the ways they are going to do it. It's not easy. I think Cuba is a country that has been so isolated for so long, and it's a really tough nut, if I can say so. So yeah, creativity and political will to help.
And perhaps if I may add, there is also, next to what we call a thematic special rapporteur, that like the special rapporteur on cultural rights or violence against women or torture, there are also country-specific ones. So if you find a majority in the Human Rights Council, there might also be a special rapporteur or a working group investigating the general situation of human rights in Cuba. And we have had that in the past, in fact. As you said, Cuba is a little isolated. If there is a coalition of governments, and again, it can be driven by non-governmental organizations, so that you're lobbying in the capitals, but also in Geneva, with a group, an international group of countries from Latin America, Africa, Asia Pacific, and less from the north, I would say. But if it is an initiative of states in the global south, it might actually get a majority. And that is a strong signal to the Cuban government that they have to do something.
Okay, thank you. If it's okay, I will go to the next question. The next question is directed towards Sol and Hamlet. Is there any chance of reasonable dialogue between artists and the government? Are they too distrustful or entrenched to have open and productive dialogue? Sol, would you like to start?
Yes. Okay, we 27 and in this case myself, we open to the dialogue. We answered the first meeting I had with the Vice Minister of Culture in December 17, and the answer for this dialogue was positive. We began to continue, but now, that moment I know too, then that moment, but now I know that dialogue never exists because they use us. But in the case of this happen, I think I'm able to have a dialogue with the state because, okay, first it's more important what happened with the Cuban people and artists now in Cuba than my thought. For that, I put this but I had to be, like Hamlet say, wise. We had to know more about our constitutional law. But at the same time, I think they are not ready for that because they think we are not strong, important people, important person. They are more high than us. The state, when I say is them. At the same time, we are open. I am open, but with rules, with negotiation. The things have to change. Now, a lot of things have to change. The 27th of January, they broke the dialogue. We go to try to find or know what happened with our three friends since appeared in the moment they give this minister in the street, punch women and put these artists in the hands of security and go to the bus with violence. For that, they broke the dialogue with this attitude. I remember the face of the minister in front of me, and when I see the face of the Minister of Culture, what I think in the first moment is this man don't wanna work with us. Then what this man wants is we disappear because they have a lot of problems and we are more problems for him because he don't care what happened with the artist, really don't care because he's the person. In that case, I think I'm open, but I think they are not ready for that. But I think we had to, if they ask me, okay, I do it. Because we need it. Cuban need it, artists need it. I don't know, Hamlet, what do you think?
Hello, you listen now, you can listen. Yes. Well, this is a very problematic thing, how we can have the connection with the government. Many people, when the situation started after the 27th and then after the 27th of January, maybe many people, they were debating about that. Why should debate? Why it could be a debate, it could be demanding, it could be a dialogue. But I think that what is demonstrated, I really understand that this from a very long time ago, that they don't have the will to dialogue, they are not committing to the dialogue. They basically watch the other side as the dark side, as a confrontational enemy. And in that case, there is not motivation to talk. I think that this question inside the Cuban artistic community, but also with the international community, referring to the other question that you make, is pretty similar. How to handle, how to those people, the Cuban government, the communists, the Central Committee, the Central Communist Party in Cuba, how it's possible to extend your hand at trying to talk about their own problems. It's very difficult, but I think it has to be doing in that main way that I was, this is my hypothesis, that I was having. Also, this is something that I do with my own work. I try to know how they think, what they want, what their strategies, the etymology, when they have their background. And by the way, the same question that the previous question that it was made by Jorge, it was one of the seminal questions that they do also with me in the interrogation in Villa Marista. So it's one of the similar. They said, what are you going to do? What is your perspective? What do you think that the international community is going to do? And I said, you said by yourself, Cuba was a signatory. They signed the Human Charter Declaration in 1948. So we are, according to the international law. And also, they all the time are talking about the international law. But though this international law is reframing to us in the Constitution, because when you are talking about freedom of speech, freedom of reunion, freedom of pacific protest, freedom of cultural rights, because are there in the Constitution. You can see in the part that says derechos, rights, from the 46 to 50 something chapter articles. You can see all how those rights are consecrated in that. But at the same time, they have another laws and other decrees, like this kind of legislation that are not given by the National Assembly. It's legislation that are approved by presidential decrees. So this is really strange, because at the same time they try to refrain themselves within the law, but at the same time they don't exercise the law. So how you can establish a dialogue is when you try to have a common interest in what they want. This has happened with me and the negotiation with Catherine Bisquet, and also with several people imprisoned. They wanted to establish a common law, a common ground, to have a negotiation to release you. This is what also they're trying to do probably with Michael Castillo, and with Luis Manuel. You have to find a common ground. This is not anymore a political negotiation. This is like this is a political negotiation, of course, but you have to find like a kind of situation similar to what the Colombian guerrilla were trying to find to release somebody from to being kidnapped. So this is a fundamental humanitarian situation what we have now, many people in jail, and how the international community can go there and talk with them, and how also we can go there. We have to basically they have to know that we know the law, that we know their law, we know what they wanted to do with the law, and try to be respectable, to have this common respect, but at the same time have to demand, to bring them then to accountability. This is something that the Cuban government don't know. It's something abstract for them. If you basically go into the dialectical conversation, they don't understand. So they have to be educated in that democratic process of conversation. So I think that's why I said, for instance, I said that we don't have a parliament, because nobody parliament there. There is no parliamentarian discussion. The etymology of parliamentarism is not in their mind. Everybody is agree or disagree. So this exercise that they were doing, the people of 27th of November, this exercise, they don't know what it is. This is something abstract. You cannot say special rapporteur of torture, special rapporteur of culture. To them, they're going to see in that term as a hostility, as a declaration of war. You have to basically try to go to understand their mentality and go into there, and also bring that idea. Look, mister, there is something that already you did. You signed that document. You are part of this mechanism. But please understand that this is the situation that we have. So in that way, you have to have like incredible knowledge of international law. So basically, we have to also ourselves educated about that. And also you have to have a knowledge of what they have, and also have like incredible empathy or with what they want or what they tried. You have to establish a common ground. But it's important to create awareness to the international community. This is important what everybody is doing right now in Madrid, in front of the embassy, create that awareness. And also the awareness is created with the journalists and everything. This same thing that we are doing here is about this awareness about the situation of cultural and human rights in Cuba. But always going with the consideration that you're going to ask them, demand it, because they are public servants. This is the role that they have in the state. And understand the difference between a state, government, political police, repression. I mean, words itself, you cannot mix up, because then you're going to lose yourself in what you're going to ask to the Cuban government. It's absolutely complicated, and I think we are growing in this sphere. I met, for instance, Solven, Julio Llopis, Rachel, many of the artists that are here, and also even Marilyn. I met them without not knowing that things. So we grow suddenly as a kind of activists when we were first artists. We were like an artist, but basically our a sympathy about for what is happening with other people, and also when common people, referring to the people in the street, and I'm not an artist or something like that, is what will really put us in that position, in understanding what is this, in this empathy. So create awareness and also go to there, but also bring it into accountability. I mean, I'm saying in the discussion, in the dialectical form. I don't know what you think, so.
Sorry, I'm totally agree with you. You have very English. I just totally agree with you. I want to talk about one only point. I remember now, years ago, the Colombia state country go to Cuba, and Cuba is the country. They finally tried to have meetings between the FARC and the state to have negotiation for the free or the finish the war in Colombia. And Cuba was the country to be in the middle of this dialogue, like a neutral place, but they can be part of this, but they can be part of the negotiation or conversations between two persons normally, because they think they are the owner of Cuba. The Minister of Culture thinks he is the owner of the minister, but that they treat us like I can go to your house and one enter, and you have to respond to that. That's happened in any case, in any institution in the country. They are the owners, and they think we are obstacles in her life. And for that, they create the security, create this kind of way, of different kind of way. That's normally the way she might to try to disappear, 27 disappear, or the people descend disappear. And in my case, Hamlet happened one case. In my case, my security man, like I say, tell me, please, go out of Cuba 1 year. We need 1 year. I don't know what they do in 1 year, but what happened is they are the owner of the Cuba. For that, it's complicated to have a dialogue with people to feel like an owner of the country. And in this case, they have to, we are open. More than nothing, what they think is we are open, but the situation is complicated for that. But we are open. That's all. Thank you.
And also, 1 second, just a little remark. And they are not the owner. They are not even owner of the state. This is what people have to understand. I mean, the common thing, they are not owner of the state. A party, a communist party, cannot be the owner of the public institution. They could, I don't know, happen for a period, but the problem is that we already Cubans understand the difference. We don't understand the difference because there are 63 years already. The difference between the government in power and the state is two things. The state is institution, like the Ministry of Culture. So he didn't understand that this is a public institution. This is our institution, not him, not Alpidio Alonso, or not somebody. In fact, it's not only his institution. It's not only the institution of the Communist Party. It's the public institution. If there is a change one day, let's hope that one day happen. After, I don't know, the Democratic Party in power in Cuba, they are not even own. They are not going to own those institutions, because this institution belongs to the public. And this is really weird. Even in the state security police, how it's called in Cuba, seguridad del Estado. They are not the seguridad del Estado. They are la seguridad del partido. They are the security of the Communist Party. They are the police of the party. And being the police of the party, they are doing police work inside the state. And they are even people that have interrogation. Can you imagine that? Interrogation, police interrogation in the Ministry of Culture. This is a police station. This is not a building from do artistic programs. You have there basically police interrogation. Can you imagine such a thing? I mean, probably it's normal for everybody that listens news about Cuba, but this is not normal even for our standards. The same what happened in the front of the Federación de Mujeres Cubanas, the Cuban Women Federation. in front of the Ministry of Culture. They were basically beating women, you know, taken to into the. So basically, you see the own contradiction, and this is what also is important: understand their own contradictions. How they don't know probably that creating constitutional laws could be the same mechanism that could put them in against the wall. So this is very interesting. What is happening in Cuba after the new constitution is very interesting, because you see all the movement, and now you can say that you can go to do a peaceful manifestation, and they get denial. So you understand the schizophrenia of the Cuban government that way, how they promote the law, but at the same time they forbidden according to the times. They said all the time, according to the times, no, esto es depende. ¿Cómo es que dicen? Ahora no es el momento. This is not the appropriate moment. Ahora no es el momento de tener esa discusión. So yeah. I don't want to talk anymore because I just taken the floor. So please, the other.
And we'll come back. I have a question that is directed, that I'd like to direct toward Manfred or Andra. In this, and this is from Gox, by the way. In this context, I wonder if there might be any incentives, political or economic, for Cuba to rejoin the OAS, where there would at least be a minimum amount required of adherence to human rights standards.
Andra, would you like to start this time?
Yes. Well, to my knowledge, Cuba remains a member of the Organization for the American States. I think it was suspended in the 60s, and then the suspension was revoked in 2009. So I think being a member of the Organization for the American States and being an active member, whether the government engages with voting or participates in organizational activities, I think this is a different story, but officially it is a member of the Organization for the American States. So as I said in my short intervention, it is held to respect the American Declaration of the Rights and Duties of Man, and is also under the monitoring of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, which is a quite powerful instrument in the defense of human rights. They can decide on individual complaints against Cuba, they issue reports, etc. So yeah, I don't think I am very versed in the politics of Cuba to know what incentives might be there. But yeah, I'm sorry, I can't give you more help.
No, I think it's, yeah, I mean, there are already, complaints that reach the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights against Cuba, and the Inter-American Commission is also willing to take them up. So that is a certain possibility. They only have not ratified the Inter-American Convention on Human Rights, so the Inter-American Court cannot do anything. There was also in the chat another convention, a United Nations Convention Against Torture, which was ratified in 1995 by Cuba, and which has also a monitoring body, the Committee Against Torture. And Cecilia said that she is in the process of writing a shadow report. So also under the reporting procedure, when states have to report to this independent expert body, civil society can also write a so-called shadow report, which will be taken up by the experts. And again, if you really focus in the shadow report on the Convention Against Torture, which is not only about torture in the narrow sense, it is also about, for instance, inhuman prison conditions, which are definitely a fact in Cuban prisons. And I mean, Hamlet can tell you more about what it means to be in a Cuban prison. So if you focus there on artists who are currently in the prison and who suffer from inhuman prison conditions, if you put this as a major focus of your shadow report, then it will be taken up by the independent experts in the Committee Against Torture. and it could also then reach also the Universal Periodic Review. There is also a possibility under the Torture Convention, Article 20 is the ex officio inquiry procedure. So if the Committee Against Torture feels, because they get so much information from non-governmental organization, media, etc., that there's a systematic practice of torture or inhuman treatment in Cuba, and if you bring about enough facts and enough allegations, there might also be an official inquiry procedure into the overall situation of torture and ill treatment in Cuba by the Committee Against Torture. So there are various ways and means that can be used, but as I said at the beginning, probably the quickest would be to convince the Special Rapporteur on Torture to deal with, to try to get an invitation to by the Cuban government and to write a report about the situation in Cuba and to visit Cuban prisoners as political prisoners in general, but artists in particular in Cuban prisons.
Manfred, thank you. Thank you for bringing this up as well. We have another question that I think, if you feel comfortable, Hamlet, I would like to direct toward you. It's from an anonymous attendee. Can Hamlet speak to the conditions of the political prisoners in Cuba? Were you treated humanely? Were you isolated or in contact with other prisoners?
Yes, I was in contact with another prisoners, and yes, this is a fact that they put in isolation. This is something that I listened. I don't have it in myself, but they threaten you all the time to do it like that. Especially, I'm talking about the specific prison of Villa Marista. They put in isolation at least many. There were people that came to the prison chair with me, and they just relocated all the time. And there was a case of a boy that he was 9 days. There was another one that was 6, and there was another one that it was 5. It depended on what they want from you and how they wanted to broke you, or I don't know. I think basically if you just start to scream at night or just annoying them, they just put you there, as they do it with many people. And I been just by 10 minutes in one of these cells when I was moved from isolation center in the middle, just to tell you a little bit, in the middle of my imprisonment, I get COVID. They never notified to my family that, which is another terrible thing. Basically, your family don't know that you are sick. You are sick, especially with a kind of illness that you don't know the consequence in the future. But anyway, they never said nothing. It was just by chance that I just met a lawyer after many days, and I tell about my condition. But anyway, they put me in the isolation center, and they bring me, and they just put me by 10 minutes in those isolation cells. Just by 10 minutes, I just waiting for be transferred from one cell to another one. But I know which one it is, and it's very small. It's like basically all the cells in Villa Marista are 3 meters, 20 centimeters per 2. Very, very small, and there are 3 people there. Sometimes they put in isolation. And I saw they take you to shave yourself, also in other cells. And I saw that one of them, many of these cells, they were empty. So this is something that they do systematically with people that basically decided to not collaborate, as they call it, not collaborate with them. And also people that basically, they were demanding to see a lawyer or their family or the phone call. Rights that you have in that prison, but at the same time, they give you those rights whenever they want. So they have some kind of law, specific law of what they do in prison. I think it's called the Rome Agreement or something like that. The Roman status, I don't remember exactly very well, but yes. Sorry, can you refresh me again, because I was talking about this specific condition. The question, which one it is? I know that there is a little time, so I just trying to be fast, and I lost myself.
Thank you.
Sorry.
about if you answered it, and also if you personally were treated humanely was part of the question.
Yes, once they try to impose you this from the very beginning, that when I arrest me, they want to naked myself in the place that I was, the public place. And I said, you know that you cannot do this because this is a violation. Basically, you have to respond when they try to do something with you. You know that this is a violation of the ley de procedimiento penal, you know, the law of the penal procedure, and this is a violation of my integrity and personal integrity. You have to be somehow your own lawyer. If you are not, you don't know nothing about your rights, you will be treated as I read in many I don't know how can I say it. If I read in the many interviews and everything, they treat you as you are in a gulag or something like that. You are nobody. You are a number. In fact, this is one of the things that they said. This is your number, and after this, you are not be calling already by your name. You are a number. I mean, it could be any system that they use in any penitentiary system in any or inmates in any country, but this is the case, the specific case of Cuba. And basically, they are cheating you, or they're trying to play with you. Basically they want you to confess, and in that manner they do whatever way they want. They show you a picture of your son. This is what is going to happen to you. You're never going to see it. You're not going to see your mother. They threaten you with your family. This kind of procedures. And also you have like a constant lie. They put like a news reels of Cuban TV all the time. You're listening all the time in TV, and you'll listen. I think this whole idea of to be there without a due process is a humanely treatment. Even if they don't beat me, your body suffer physically in this such extreme condition there. Especially what you can say, if you get COVID, I don't know how do I get it because I was in prison. If you get in COVID and they don't notify to your family, this is some way of torture. I don't know, because this is not anymore psychological torture, which I have it already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for also being willing to share details and answer. Thank you.
Yes.
I also, there are questions coming in from Facebook, and we're also taking note of them. So thank you very much for submitting those. And for questions that can't be answered tonight, we will keep track of them, and you can also email them to the Applied Human Rights email address, which will be dropped into the chat. So we have time for 2 more questions. I want to take a question now that's come to us from Facebook by Talia. The question is, what makes Cuba's current context different to most dictatorships in the recent past is the rise of social and new media. I wonder how art creators feel about moving their art practice into the digital realm in order to practice in Cuba, and the possibilities to involve Cuban audiences to create dialogue, bringing art to the people, but also to the art market. I know the internet is still a problem in Cuba, so maybe the international community has to strengthen the ability of internet in Cuba. I wonder how an art market could work in the digital space of NFTs in Cuba. Maybe Sol, you'd like to address this one.
Thank you. I think you can repeat because it's too long. Please, you can repeat the question.
I can repeat 2 parts. So what makes Cuba's current context different to most dictatorships in the recent past? So the rise of social media makes Cuba's context very specific in relationship to most dictatorships in the recent past. And the question really is, I wonder how an art market could work in the digital space of NFTs, so in Cuba. Is that on anyone's mind that you've heard of? Do you personally have thoughts about that?
I am not a specialist for NFT work, really. I begin to learn now with the internet. I have to study. I don't have time to study because we are, in the exhibition. But in Cuban context, I'm going to talk more about the situation with internet. what the arts is more, right now we have more promotion of the arts, moving about the art with the internet. Remember, if someone know, we have internet in Cuba, data, internet until 2019, no Hamlet. Before that, we have in some parks in Cuba, we have some Wi-Fi. You can go to some park to have internet, but in 2019, beginning, the people can buy data to have internet. With that, we begin like a revolution on internet for the Cuban, no? More than nothing the Cuban, but the internet is in Facebook, and with the time beginning to enter more in Twitter, Instagram, but right now, the word of NFT is the word I don't know really, no? But the interesting thing is the internet help us like artists to promote our work and what we do in the COVID too. It's a tough situation. We cannot do exhibitions. It's complicated for have the people can go to the gallery. We live to the people. The gallery live with the people inside. But that is complicated in this situation. For that, internet can be beginning to be like the tool for promote the art. We made it in the middle of the situation. In the example, the exhibition Obsession opened here in Vienna, really open 18 December. But normally the exhibition is done 27th of November. We have the opening. This opening was in Zoom because we for the condition in Vienna for the lockdown, we can do the exhibition with people. And we had to do it December 18th. For that, the internet in Cuba is in Vienna. We're not talking about Vienna, but the friends and the artists, part of the artists is in Cuba. And for that, we can be more able to see and promote art. And internet is the tool we have. The only tool, the most important tool we have to make visible what happened in Cuba, not only in art. It's our situation, violation of rights, no libertarian expression. And for that, it's the most important tool we use in this year, 2 years, more than that. I don't know if I answered the question, but really NFT is not a thing now, in the future maybe.
Thank you. And for our last question, I have a question for Hamlet. The question is from Pablo A. Medina. Hamlet, can you describe your stamp project that was the so-called reason that the Cuban government gave for your imprisonment?
Yes, why not? Well, very fast. I just decided to make some stamps with the logos of, with the acronyms of 27N, MSAE of Movimiento San Isidro, and several ideas more, and to put in a Cuban currency and distribute it to basically create this wondering of what about this thing, because we know in the artistic community in Cuba what it is, what it is Movimiento San Isidro, what it is 27N, and what it is, I don't know, 11th of July, but I mean, but many people don't know exactly. This is something that could be a dialogue that is established inside a very small circle. So I try to address the audience in the street about that, especially in the Cuban currency. So it was doing in the moment that Cuban currency, this evaluating or devaluating changes from Cook to USD to, to many specifications that they have with the Cuban currency, just to print it. It is a previous experience that I saw in countries like Poland, but artists like Cito Mireles at the same time they do it. And it was just a very small strategy that I put it in the chat. I just suggested in the chat of the 27N group. And in fact, people, they were not even taking very much attention about that. It was just like maybe this is one idea that we can do to move the conscience a little bit. What I call it aesthetic disobedience, referring specific to the civil disobedience. But in that scenario, it was just to moving a little bit, and the stamps they was doing in the high currency values, like Cuban money from Cuban currency from 100 pesos, 1,000 pesos, or 200 pesos. And it was one thing. Also, I wanted to address a little bit the question of the previous question, just tiny, Marilyn, please. I think it was very important to the all movement that are happening in Cuba, all the movement in the streets, in the social conscience, is the important the internet. Internet was something that was approved by the Cuban government to be in your house, since they needed to have like a kind, given a frame, a legitimacy frame to the new constitution in 2019. And they just dropped this in the public sphere, internet. So basically what I'm talking about is that you can have your own mobile with internet in your house, and you can check the news, and you can also, many people filter the news with the VPNs and everything, and you can see it. But at the same time, there is a price for that. The price is that the Cuban government understand the mobility of the Cuban audience, the Cuban public, the Cuban ideas, and they issued a decree 370, Decreto 370. And then there is another article, another decree that it was established a few months ago, in August, I think, or in September, I don't remember very well. It was the decree 35, Decreto 35, or Article 35. So that also tackled the freedom of expression and what you can use here. So I just want to accommodate this a little bit in that ideas.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, very unfortunately, we have to come to the end of our Q&A. But remember, you can email the questions, and we'll be in touch this way. We'll close tonight with some final comments from each speaker. So anything you want to say as we end tonight's discussion, and of course, continuing discussion. Manfred, I would like to start with you for some final comments.
Yes, I think it was a very enlightening discussions that we had, I think one of the main lessons is that you should never give up hope, even if a state is entering into more repression because it thinks that it has to protect its government against civil society. There are always ways and means, and I think what is important is that there is a strong civil society in Cuba, and it still exists, and that is very important. There are other countries like, I don't know, North Korea, where there's simply no civil society within the country. It does exist in Cuba. There are also, because the question was about the internet, I mean, there are bloggers that are able to actually express their opinion under difficult circumstances. And there is an international knowledge and attention about what's going on. And if this combination can actually create enough pressure on the government to change. I mean, Cuba has been for such a long time kind of isolated within the Organization of American States, also because of the sanctions, economic sanctions by the United States. So, but again, there might be a possibility of starting a dialogue in order to bring Cuba again more into the international community. There was also a question that was raised, which might be countries that could be used in order to facilitate this dialogue. I would think, for instance, about the new government in Chile that was just elected, or the new president, which might be, and also the High Commissioner for Human Rights is a Chilean, former president of Chile. So there might be ways and means to draw the attention and perhaps bring about change. So most important, don't give up hope, be encouraged to fight on.
Thank you so much, Manfred. And it's great also to see all of your faces now with the cameras on as we end tonight. Andra, can I pass it to you for some final words?
Yes, I am speaking in the same line as Manfred. I think listening tonight to Hamlet and to Saul's testimonies, I was endlessly inspired and impressed by how committed they are, how passionate they are in this fight. And like doing this work with avant-garde lawyers, I know how hard it is and how unbalanced the fight is. You have on one hand the government, and on the other hand you have individuals and civil society. It is totally unbalanced, and I think one needs a bit of passion and maybe some madness to take on this fight. And I think artists in general do have that. And as I said, looking how knowledgeable Saul and Hamlet are now, and how they know so much about the law of their countries, and how it was really, really impressive. And yeah, I was really touched by Hamlet's observations about how public institutions are owned by the people and not by the Communist Party. And I think understanding this and having the willingness to understand how the system works and the government works and what a law is, and speaking to lawyers, I think this is what makes the strength of civil society. And for me, we don't meet very often civil society from Cuba, right? So seeing how strong it is, it's just extremely yeah, inspiring to see. So on this note, onwards.
Thank you, Andra. And so, can I invite you to come in?
I want to thank a few things. I think first, thank you for the invitation, Manfred and Matai, and Marilyn, of course, with invitation and take her time to talk and think in Cuba. And recently, one friend called me from Cuba and give it to me, say, make a joke and say, okay, you know, we had a new COVID cepa, so the new kind of COVID, and the name is immigration. Is the combination Omicron with immigration. See, the calculation is in this year, almost the 25% of young people before 30 years is go out of Cuba for the critical condition we have in Cuba. Not only crisis with COVID, economic, social, but more than nothing is the repression in Cuba now. All the parents want to try to do everything for her son go out of Cuba because they are afraid to the new protest. The sons go to the protests and they go to the jail for 20 or 25 years. The other thing I think is in this, between 2019 and 2021, the Cuban president signed 5, because the other day is over, 5 new decrees, very strong, very controversial. And it's 349, we're talking about that, 370, 373, 31, 35. And in this last week appeared another in relation with the money. If I don't know if you read about that, is the state find some person receive money from other part of the country directly go to they have the option to take this person in the jail. This is so crazy, but I feel hope, like I say at the beginning, but at the same time, we need take care about this, because in some point, if we lose our view about what happened in Cuba, we stop to thinking in Cuba, we stop to do something from Cuba. I think something worse than that's happened, and we don't want that. And for that, I sent to everyone, please, not only during this conference, so to everyone, we have to talk we had to do things. We had to, I don't know how, because I tried to do all the can I do inside of Cuba, and I try to do everything out of Cuba, like curator, like person, like human being. But I think we had to continue, don't stop to try to do something in Cuba. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Hamlet, I'd like to invite you to come in.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Marilyn. Well, for me, it was a really incredible conversation also with Andreas and Manfred and Marilyn and so about that. And also I see this kind of optimism, but also I see it in the past, because what really make the difference, and the Cuban government have this narrative all the time, that this historic approach to the one single communist party, it came because there are backgrounds in history. So this is not true. There's no background in history of monolithical party in Cuba. I don't know, they try to compare with the Soviet Union and Russia, and we are different. The optimism is the past, and it's that the civil society in Cuba understand in a historiographical comprehension, you have in vain already. This is the DNA of what we have. We have a republic in 1902, and we know the guarantees of law. Cuba was signatory of the Human Rights Charter in 1948. In fact, collaborate in the draft of the document that was given to Eleanor Roosevelt. So come on, we are not some kind of crazy republic that was emerging the other day. We have those knowledge, and what the Cuban government is doing with this bunch of laws that Saul was mentioning is try to basically making apart that conviction, that inspiration that we have in ourselves. They are dropping laws to basically incivilize you. So I think that this is very important. I mean, civilize you in the political knowledge. And in that way, I think the Cuban society have the will of re-education, the political re-education, to understand what is happening there, and also have the will in the political reculturization. So culture and education is important in that way. So if we have a strong civil society, understanding their own cultural values, their own educational value in terms of politics, we have to then we understand the value of freedom, of liberty. So we understand in that way, and in that manner, we going to be more clear about that. So optimistic is in that way. Optimistic is that it's not dead, but at the same time, the government is throwing those tools to tackle that optimistic vision. You have internet, but then you have Decree 370. You have booming artist space curatorial projects inside Cuba. Then they drop the 349. So basically, it's the government who is responding to the legitimate demand of the society. In that way, we have to be optimistic. There are going to be even more people like us that we are discussing here, because after the 11th of July, people even are more aware. So in that term, I just close, and I thank you to Marilyn, Andrea, Manfred, Marilyn, and so thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Hamlet. So with these last comments from Hamlet and from all of our speakers, it nearly concludes our event. I'll say just a few more words. But I'd really like to thank everyone who's attending, who's watching. I'd really like to thank everyone behind the scenes who's here making all of this happen and who made it happen before today, including George Younes, co-founder of the Vienna Master, and Walter Suntinger, who co-facilitated the workshop on freedom of expression that we did with our students. Thank you to our students. And thank you to the entire Vienna Master team, and to Hauke, Sophia, and Liz. And thank you to all of you for being here and taking your time to speak and really inspiring with these words and with the knowledge and everything that you shared. Thank you to Manfred, thank you to Andra for sharing your expertise. So thank you to Hamlet for having the courage also to share your expertise and your knowledge and your personal experiences. And all of your work is a reminder that art and dialogue has the power to bring us together and to move us into action. So as a result of tonight's discussion, if you would like to get in touch with the Vienna Master or Entre or any of the speakers, you can visit our websites. Contact information is also there. And also the recording of tonight will be accessible on the Angewandtes Facebook page, where we streamed it live, and you'll be able to watch it later. And if you'd like to see the Obsession exhibition, it's also possible for just some few more days. Thank you very much for joining us, and I wish you all a good evening. Goodbye to everyone who participated, and we'll be speaking again soon.